This church was organized on May the 10th, 1922, and they named it Central Baptist Church. They met in the city high school building for 3 weeks until they rented an old tobacco barn on Main Street. Soon after they moved into the barn, they had a revival. There were 40 conversions and 105 additions to the church. On July the 25th, 1922, the church bought a lot on Mechanic Street, which is now University Street. That is the same location that we moved from when we came here. 6 months later, the basement to the new church was finished, and they held their first service there. On July the 20th, 1926, the contract was let to build an auditorium over the existing basement, and that turned into a great building. On January the 31st, 1943, the church paid off the mortgage on the church and was debt-free. They held a dedication and celebration service at that time. Norma and I joined the church in 1951 and have been members ever since, except for the 2 years I spent in the military. The church had some great pastors, and Brother Callan is one of them. He is the 21st pastor. In the past, the church has had some very hard, trying times. The mortgage was one of them, but the Lord has blessed us in many, many ways through the years. He is still blessing us with another new location and facility. Still to come is a new worship center in the near future.
I started church in Central Baptist Church in 1947 and saw the first addition to our church, the educational building, in 1960. And to give you some few figures here on some of the things, how different it was then and it is now. In 1955, our membership was $596, and our total cash receipts that year was $16,282. In 1960, when we started our educational building, we had 518 membership, and our total receipts were $23,127. We floated bonds for $50,000 to build this new educational building, 2 stories high, on the west side of the church. And most of the bonds were all bought by members of the church. And Ham Brundage told me one time that a lot of people did not ever cash their bonds in. They just let them go back to the church.
In 1950, was a young man back at that time and sang in a quartet at Central Baptist Church. We called it the Melody, really the Melody Five. It was 5 of us. I was not a member. I was the only one. I was a member out in the country. We, even at that time, I was dating my wife, and we would come to Central at night. And over the years, at that time, we would go to our church on Sunday morning, but we would come to Central a lot at nights. When the church split and Southside came off of Central, we quit coming for quite a few years. And then our church got down so low that our 2 kids was the only children in our country church, so we knew that we had to do something. So we started back at Central. And at that time, there was, I won't ever forget the first Sunday that we came. They had a youth revival with Sandy Smith, the preacher, and the church was completely full. And we think that we got a parking problems now. Back at that time, probably the youth of the young married couples would fill up all the parking place. They parked at the Weaver County Electric. They parked on the city. In fact, they parked a lot of places they didn't supposed to park because they just didn't have any place to park. So some of us in the early 60s, before we really bought any land, we said we've got to buy land. We are landlocked. Hornbuckle on the west, Waller on the south, and the east. We were landlocked. So James Ross was the one that really pushed this and bought a piece of property completely back on the back street. Some didn't thought that wasn't a good idea, but as it turned out, it really, the Lord was really in it, because we can see what's going on now. We could not sold it to the bank for what we got out of it. So we know that the Lord was in it, and we've got a good facility now, and the Lord has really worked in all of it.
Linda and I came back to or came to UT Martin in 1960 as students at UTM, and she actually became a member of Central Baptist Church, and I never did join. We attended regularly, but I didn't join. Once we got married after we graduated from UT Martin, and then came back to become members of the church in 1970. One of the things I remember, on one occasion, they almost lost the church and had to, actually right after building it, had to move into a tobacco barn for a short period of time because they couldn't pay the notes on the church. Another thing I recall was that they paid the mortgage 1 year by killing rats. And I think they paid them 5 cents a piece for the rats that were killed or something similar to that. And apparently they made enough money to keep the church going and to pay off the mortgage. But those are some things that I recall about the church, that hard times in a way many years ago.
When we were in high school, a lot of our friends went to Central Baptist Church, and we didn't have service at night, so we would oftentimes attend the church there. And in the early '71, I guess it was, we was moving from New Home Baptist Church here, and about the third Wednesday night that we attended, we discovered that the church had a big disagreement going, and we talked about what we were going to do. So we just decided that we'd wait and just continue to go on and say nothing. And that's what we did. And the church did develop, but it grew and moved on to greater things, as you can see, and where we are today. We did have, I've served on the insurance committee for a good number of years, and occasionally the insurance people would come by and for an inspection. And the last inspection we had, they were down at the old youth house, and they crawled down in the basement and saw the wiring was the old knob and tube. They did go ahead and insure the building, but we were definitely surprised that they did.
Linda and I came to Central Baptist Church in the mid-'60s. We had been going to a small country church, which actually, I was Methodist, and so I came to the Central Baptist Church, and eventually moved our membership there, and became active in Central Baptist Church there. One of the first committees that I was elected to serve on was the Properties Committee, and at the time I was really honored to be chosen to be on that committee. The church was beautiful. It was astoundingly antique and old. It was a beautiful church, but behind the scenes there were a lot of problems, and it prompted our church to, because of the cost of insurance and because of the cost of upkeep, to consider other options. And the options that were given to the church was to remodel the existing auditorium and upgrade the church, or build a new auditorium on the existing property, or to relocate. After a considerable discussion and a lot of looking for property, the church moved in that direction, and that's what prompted us to be here. We bought this piece of property. Over the years, we bought a lot of property around the church. We bought property from off of Park Street. In 1998, we bought property off of Elm Street, University Street, Summer Street. We bought property all around the church, which actually gave the church more value. But the move here, I think, has been a great move.